Can you solve this mystery? This is about a boy who disappeared at a carnival. Even though he's presumed to be dead, no one could find out exactly how he died, but all the clues are hidden in what I'm about to say. One day the boy arrived at the carnival and came across a man who asked him if he wanted to play a game. The man told him if he won, he'd get $1,000. The rules are simple. There are 10 large metal boxes. Inside one of them is $1,000 prize money. If you can open the right one, then you get the money. But the boxes are too strong to be opened by your hands or even with a hammer. You have to use a blowtorch. The boy asked, is there a time limit? The man said he could take as much time as he wanted, and he'll even help him out. If the boy gave him $5, he will put him right next to the prize money. The boy happily took out his wallet and handed the man $5. There was a mischievous grin on the man's face. The game started. The prize money was right in front of the boy. He could see it, he could touch it. But even though the boy won the game, he would never be able to spend the money, and he died shortly after he won the game. How did the boy die? Can you solve this mystery?
This is why you should never open your door for strangers. In 2013, a woman let her dog out to use the bathroom one more time before bed. After only a few minutes, she starts hearing scratching on her door, which is typically the sound her dog makes when he's ready to come in. But it just seemed way too soon for him to be done being outside. So she decides to look through the peephole to make sure it really is her dog. But what she sees is terrifying. A deranged-looking man is right outside her door, staring intently at her door handle, waiting for it to turn open. As she's looking in horror, unable to do anything, he starts scratching at the door as hard as he can, never leaving his gaze from the door handle. She manages to stifle a scream. She backs away and realizes her dog is still outside. So she goes to the side window, but there's no sign of her dog, and so she goes back to the door to see if maybe the man's moved. He hasn't moved, his mouth is open, and he's staring directly at the peephole. Then he turns around and walks away. With the man gone, she discovers her dog unharmed, his leash had just been cut. But that means he had a knife.
Story time about how my best friend kissed the guy that I liked right in front of me. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. And we're gonna call my best friend Sophia. We were in a friend group of 3. And the other person in our friend group, his name was Josh. And that just happened to be the boy that I really liked. And Sophia knew how much I liked him. Like, I would tell her all the time how excited I was, you know, that we were hanging out. And she would be like, oh my god, I'm so happy for you. Like, you guys would be so cute. Just a bunch of fake. So the one day we're all sitting in our free period, super bored, and our friend Dylan says, hey, why don't we play spin the bottle? With a water bottle, of course. So it was us 4 and a few other kids from our class. Well, Sophia decided to spin the bottle first. And of course, who does it land on? Josh. And I'm sitting back like I have nothing to worry about. My best friend wouldn't do that to me. Well, of course I was wrong. I thought she was going to apologize, but after she gave me a very smirky smile, well, they started hanging out more and I felt extremely left out, so I just decided to forgive her.
Am I the bridezilla for expecting my niece to miss her prom to come to my wedding reception? So I am having my wedding reception on June 11th. I have been planning it for 2 years because COVID interrupted it. I had a small ceremony last year with just close family, and we decided to do the reception the following year, with hopes that COVID would die down a little. My sister was my matron of honor and my niece, who's 16, was my flower girl. So we are inviting 60 people to the wedding reception because we still want to keep it small. We have already spent a good amount of money on the wedding, and to try to cut costs, we asked my niece if she would be DJ for the night. She likes doing that type of thing. And she said yes, as long as her boyfriend could come to the wedding. Am I the bridezilla for expecting my niece to miss her prom to come to my wedding reception? We of course told her that was fine and bought a sound system and lighting equipment, probably around $300 for everything, so that she could have fun DJing and it would look okay and sound good. So we sent out invitations months ago and had gotten the RSVP from my sister and her family a few months ago as well. Today my sister calls me and tells me that all of a sudden my niece's school came out with the date for her prom and it's on the same date. I told her it was ridiculous that they would consider not coming since they already committed to coming to my reception and they are in my bridal party, on top of the fact that I have spent hundreds of dollars on them for their bridal clothing, their food, and the sound equipment, over $500. On top of that, my niece is only a junior in high school. Am I the bridezilla for expecting my niece to miss her prom to come to my wedding reception? She said that my niece's school doesn't have senior proms and that it's important for her to go because it will be her only chance to go. So I asked her to call the school and see if she could go the next year or else I would. I wound up calling and found out that she could go the next year and all she had to do was talk to the principal to get permission. I told my sister this, and I guess she told my niece because she texted me telling me she wasn't going to miss her prom because she was up for prom court. So the real reason she wanted to go this year was because of a popularity contest and not because it was a once-in-a-lifetime event. So I told her that she was choosing a dance over family. Am I the asked my niece to honor her commitment and come to my wedding once she found out her prom was on the same date.
Am I the threatening not to walk down the aisle if my fiance's twin brother attends the wedding? I'm supposed to get married to my fiance, but there's a big problem concerning our wedding, and that's his twin brother. His brother is a drug addict and got in a lot of troubles in the past because of it. Obviously, I don't want an addict invited to my wedding, but my fiance insists not only to invite him, but to make him his groomsman too. He says he went to rehab and he's now clean, but I seriously doubt that. I know people like him, they never change. We kept arguing about it for a couple of days till yesterday when he invited his brother and his mom over to dinner to convince me. I was furious that he would invite the drug addict and their nutcase of a mom to my house without consulting me first. Ivy threatening to not walk down the aisle if my fiance's twin brother attends. I told them I'm not going to make dinner for a dopehead and to please leave my house. His brother sobbed, saying I'm unfair for not letting him support his brother on the big day. Mother-in-law berated me for how heartless I was. I said drop the act. These stupid mistakes literally landed him in jail, and I'm not going to allow a former offender to my wedding. I told mother-in-law to stay in lane as this is not her wedding, and she's also a big reason for why we got into this situation as she kept enabling his addiction. They shouted at me, but I eventually managed to get them to leave. Fiance is furious, but it's not my fault they're nutcases. I said if I see him at the wedding, I'm not walking.
Let me tell you about a time that a car followed me home. And tell me if I'm just overreacting. So on that day, I was leaving from school around 6 o'clock in the evening. Side note, I'm using this e.l.f. glitter eyeshadow. And it's actually really pretty in person. Anyways, it was a really long day. And I just wanted to go home and see my family because I haven't seen them all day. And at that point, I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. I was irritated that this old beat-up van was going 30 and 45, so naturally I floored the car and I passed him. At this point, I was about a mile away from home. The first thing I heard when I got out of my car was, "Are you late for dinner?" What? I was like, huh? He's like, "Are you late for dinner?" What? It took me a couple of seconds to realize that this was the van that I had passed. So of course, I looked at him and I ran back into my apartment. Bad idea! Now he knows my apartment complex number. Am I being over dramatic? Is this guy gonna try and kidnap me someday? Because I'm not gonna lie, he looks creepy.
Imagine the man that your parents hired to work on their house ends up being the same one who kidnaps you in the middle of the night. In the fall of 2001, a young girl named Elizabeth and her mother, Lois, came across a clean-shaven panhandler in downtown Salt Lake City. Lois hands the man who goes by Emmanuel $5 and tells him that he can earn more by working on the family's roof. He gladly accepts this offer. Fast forward to one summer night on June 5th, 2002. Elizabeth, who is only 14 at this time, is jolted awake in the early morning hours by a knife pressed to her throat and a voice ordering her out of bed. Her younger sister, Mary Catherine, is also awakened but remains motionless during the kidnapping. Elizabeth instantly recognizes him as Emmanuel, who is really a man named Brian David Mitchell. She's then forced on a grueling hike up the foothills behind her home until they reach a campsite where they're married by Mitchell's wife and accomplice, Wanda Barzee. 2 hours after the kidnapping, Mary Catherine, who was only 9 at the time, finally rushes to her parents' room to inform them what happened. She was terrified and frozen in fear, thinking that the man would come back for her if she moved. Mary Catherine wakes up her parents and says, "Elizabeth is gone. You won't find her. A man came and took her, and he had a gun." Elizabeth's parents shot up instantly to check the house before realizing what Mary Catherine said was true and calling the police. While her parents were frantically looking for her, Elizabeth was at a campsite where the abuse started early on. Over the next 9 months, Elizabeth would be assaulted every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, and tortured in other ways like starvation. She recalls being at the bottom and thinking that it couldn't get any worse, but being proven wrong every time she had that thought. She wondered to herself if her family would still even love her or want her if they found out what this man had done to her. In July, Elizabeth is forced to tell Mitchell about her family and mentions her 15-year-old cousin. He becomes interested in making her his ex-wife and attempts to abduct her the same way that he did with Elizabeth, but is not successful. A couple months later in September, they take Elizabeth to San Diego, moving between campsites and eating at homeless shelters. Elizabeth is forced to wear a veil and no one recognizes her in the public. On October 12th, Mary Catherine thumbs through Guinness Book of World Records coming to the page of a muscular woman. This is when she suddenly remembers a homeless handyman who helped fix the roof the previous year, his voice identical to the one that ordered her sister out of the room on the traumatic night in June. In February 2003, after clashing with authorities over the issue, the Smart family goes public with a sketch of Emmanuel. This is when people start coming forward and claiming to recognize this man. Elizabeth knew that her only chance at freedom was going back to Utah where her family was. She told Mitchell, who was a self-proclaimed pastor with strong religious views, that she felt that God wanted them to return to Utah. After some prayer, Mitchell ultimately agreed with Smart and was determined to hitchhike back to Utah. This is when Elizabeth had a little bit more hope. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, The Kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart. As they walked through the streets going to different stores, Elizabeth was screaming inside of her mind to everyone who passed. "Look at me, look at my eyes, don't any of you recognize me?" But everyone just walked by. Mitchell told them that they were heading back to the campsite, but along the way they came across a party house. There was lots of music, alcohol, and people inside. While inside, Mitchell starts preaching and leaves Elizabeth's side. A man leans into Elizabeth and starts talking to her, but Mitchell quickly is at her side again, anxious to keep her under his control. They make it back to the campsite where Mitchell is intoxicated and passes out. The next morning, he tells Barzy and Elizabeth that the Lord wants them to walk among the people freely and they'll be protected from any danger. Though he concealed her identity with a veil, he failed to conceal his own face. From the sketches that the Smart family released of him that was featured on America's Most Wanted, he was instantly recognized. Upon returning to Utah, at least 2 different couples spotted Smart and her kidnappers. Mitchell had taken them to the public library to do some research on where they were headed in the winter. As soon as they entered, Elizabeth noticed a man staring at her, then getting up and making a phone call. Mitchell and Barzy were looking at maps in California until he decided that San Diego was going to be their new home. That's when Elizabeth looked up to see a man approaching them. He pulled out a badge and told Mitchell that they had received a few calls about the girl in the veil and needed to confirm that this was not a missing girl. Barzy put her hand on Elizabeth's leg, digging her nails into her thigh to keep her quiet. Mitchell told the officer that she's his daughter and he can't remove the veil because it's forbidden in their religion. A little back and forth and the officer ran out of questions and left. She didn't speak up out of fear and everything that was running through her mind. Some time passes and it became clear that Mitchell was afraid of being found out. One night as they're traveling, he tells Elizabeth that he's going to keep her at the campsite forever as it's too dangerous to bring her around the city. As they're walking, a police car approaches them. Then another one joins. The officers get out and start asking Elizabeth for her name and where she's from, but she's terrified and says nothing. Mitchell is answering for her, but the officer realizes that she's afraid and won't say anything. He gently puts his hand on her shoulder and asks her if she's Elizabeth Smart. He tells her that her family misses her and has been looking for her. They love her and they want her back home. Finally, with this reassurance, she says, "I am Elizabeth." She's joyfully reunited with her family and Mitchell and Barzy are taken away. Barzy and Mitchell are both indicted on federal charges. In May 2010, Barzy receives a 15-year sentence. That following year, in May 2011, Mitchell is sentenced to life in prison. Elizabeth got married in 2012 and has children of her own now. She's released 2 books about her experience and healing.
This is why you should always lock your front doors. A kid living with both of his parents decided to watch a movie for their family weekly movie night. He then gets up to use the restroom. As he is in the restroom, he sees all of the power in the house cuts off. And then he hears 2 loud thumps. He locks the bathroom door and hears heavy objects being dragged across the hallway. The kid, freaking out, runs out of the bathroom and runs into the restroom. Once he is inside the room, he locks the door. As he locks the door, he jumps in bed and acts like he's asleep and hopes that this person who is in the house will ignore a child sleeping. He closes his eyes and hears the door creak at the same time. He squints his eyes and sees a man with no eyes dragging the bodies of both of his parents. The man dragging his parents sits his mom's dead body in a chair facing him, and then sets the dad's body on the floor facing up. It was almost like whoever was in the house who killed them wanted him to see it. He then sees the man writing something on the wall and then climbs under his bed. He laid there for hours knowing that if he moved a muscle he would end up just like his parents. He finally built up enough courage to read the wall, and the writing on the wall said,
What would you do if someone said this to you? Once there was a girl in Korea who got in an elevator in the apartment building that she was living in when a stranger came in and told her something that was absolutely terrifying. This stranger came into the elevator with her and tried to make some small talk. He looked at the elevator buttons and said, "Oh, I see that you live on the 14th floor. I live on the 13th floor." She gave him a friendly response and even tried to flirt a little bit. She thought that he was attractive and wondered if they would get to know each other better. But things quickly took a horrifying turn. When the elevator arrived at the 13th floor, the man got off and said, "See you soon." But as the doors closed, he pulled out a knife from his jacket and with a terrifying smile said, "Upstairs." Then he ran towards the stairs. By this time, it was too late. The elevator doors were already closed. She tried to push as many buttons as possible, but it was of no use. She was stuck inside the elevator, unable to do anything, as the elevator made its way up to the 14th floor.
This girl literally lived a nightmare. A 17-year-old girl was watching TV late at night when her motion detector lights in her driveway suddenly went on. She assumed it was just an animal, so she got up, drew the blinds, and went back to watching TV. Then a little bit later, it happened again. Before she could even react, she looks over and clearly makes out a silhouette of a person right behind the blinds who starts banging aggressively on the window. The girl stands up and goes, "I'm gonna call the cops!" And the figure stops for just a second, sprints to the side door and starts pounding even louder on that, screaming incoherently. The girl runs to the bathroom, barricades herself inside while she waits for the police, and then her worst nightmares come true. She hears glass shatter in the other room. After a few minutes of silence, she opens her door just a crack to get a peek outside, and standing in her living room next to a broken window is some crazy old woman who looks over at her and starts sprinting toward her. The lady comes smashing into the door and starts wailing on it until the police arrive and take her away. She was a lunatic who had escaped her facility.
I'm at Asa for not telling my wife I donated my sperm 15 years ago. I was in college and really broke. I wanted to make some money, so I ended up donating some sperm. I never really gave it a second thought, and I only did it a couple times. I do know that there were some kids produced from that, but they're obviously not mine. My wife and I are trying to have a kid, and it somehow came up, and I told her everything. I wasn't one to hide it, but it definitely wasn't something I was going around telling everyone. I never told my wife because I didn't think it was relevant. They're not my kids. My wife freaked out at me, saying that I had 15-year-olds probably somewhere in the country, and saying how could I never tell her this. I understand her frustration, but she's making me out to be the bad guy. It was such a long time ago, and I don't even think about it anymore. She hasn't talked to me, and I don't know what to do or how to make her forgive me. So I'm just wondering, was I the asshole here? Should I have told her sooner?
Am I the pouring my drink on someone who threw hers in my face first? I went out clubbing last night with my friends. There were 7 of us, 3 guys including me and 4 girls. My girlfriend Hannah was meant to come too, but she was feeling ill. I offered to stay in with her, but she insisted I go out and have a good time. At the club, my friends got talking to a group of women who apparently worked in finance. They were here for some kind of conference and were checking out the local places in their spare time. One of them, Lauren, started trying to chat to me and asked for my number. She was pretty, but I was not interested as I have a girlfriend. I told her this, but she then started asking for pics of Hannah. I showed her and she said that I could do so much better than that. I was very annoyed and told her to leave me alone. Later on, me and my friends were dancing and Lauren and her group came up to us and she started trying to dance with me. I gave her the brush off once again and moved away from her and she gave me a dirty look. A while later, she came back and by that point, she was very drunk. She smirked at me and threw her drink in my face. I was absolutely fuming and in response, I poured my beer on her head. She started crying and ran to the bouncer who got us all kicked. Everyone then proceeded to have a go at me. I understand that they were annoyed that we got kicked out, but everyone was acting like I was wrong to pour my drink on her. They all saw her splash her drink in my face, but everyone was saying it was nasty to do that to a girl. The ladies in our group were talking about how upset they'd be if someone ruined their dress, hair, makeup by doing that. But when I pointed out she did the same to me, everyone said it wasn't the same. Nobody said goodbye to me last night, and I made my own way home. I told Hannah what happened, and she agrees that I didn't do anything wrong. I tried to explain myself again over the group chat, but everyone has ignored me. How do I sort this out in a mature way?
I'm looking at this man like I hope you saved every single dime you could because you are not going to see it. We are going to die. Then, all of a sudden, the pilot comes on the intercom and goes, "We would like to congratulate Flight Attendant Erica on her last day with our airlines before she attends law school this fall." At this point, I'm like, of course it is Flight Attendant Erica's last day with Shack in the Sky Airlines because that's what's going to be in the headlines when we go down. Promising young flight attendant dies before she can ever attend law school. That I can see the headline right in front of me, right? So I start praying to every single god that's ever existed, thinking whoever gets back to my voicemail first is the one I start believing in Monday. And all of a sudden, the turbulence clears and we are smooth sailing. I'm going, thank God. Thank God. And just as I'm thinking that, a commercial jet, a 3-story airplane flies right overhead of our closet with wings. We get caught in their turbulence and we do a straight 50-foot drop. When I tell you I was contemplating my life, that entire 45 minutes is what it felt like. By the time we stopped dropping, my mom had put my dad on marital probation. She was like, you know our vows say till death do us part, in sickness and in health. And I don't think there's anything in there about a bad plane deal. I can still leave you.
Bye, sisters.